Have you ever wondered,
What's inside the RBI vault?
Hi there! Welcome to the vault. The RBI vault contains everything from letters and photos to priceless manuscripts and first editions, even Dr. Riemenschneider's organ shoes and baton. Although we focus on Bach and the Baroque period, we cover a wide variety of periods and styles, and there's a good chance we have a first edition of something you are working on right now. For example, the Musical Offering.
the RBI has a first edition of the Musical Offering, which means, of course, that this is the first time this was printed. Now, Bach himself had this printed in a limited run, and there are fewer than 20 copies of this existing in the world today. So it's pretty rare, and it's pretty cool. Bach himself could have been touching these pages. So what is the Musical Offering? It is essentially a compositional challenge. Bach loved compositional challenges. If he was doing our Bach Run today, he wouldn't just do the Bach Run, he would do the Bach Marathon, maybe even the Bach Ironman. What was this challenge? It was to write 16 different movements all on the same theme. He wrote 2 Ricercars, an older term for fugue. He wrote 10 canons, and he wrote 4 movements of a trio sonata. The conventional wisdom is that this musical theme that he used for all of these pieces was written by Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, when Bach visited him in Berlin. But the Musical Offering is steeped in controversy. No less than 7 articles have appeared about this in our own Bach journal. Scholars have questioned, was the theme even by Frederick the Great? Why did Bach choose to write this work? What order did he intend for the pieces? What instrumentation should they use? The list goes on, and there are no definitive answers. What is clear is that Bach was pretty incredible. On the orchestra concert, we will hear one of the pieces from the Musical Offering, the Ricercar A6, which is a fugue for no less than 6 voices. Charles Rosen called this among the greatest achievements of Western European civilization.
What Bach explains in the Ricercar is an early fugal style from the early Baroque period brought to a late Baroque composition. And the Musical Offering has 2 of these. We have the one with 3 voices and another at the end with 6 voices. And the one that's being played with 6 voices is written so that each voice is written on its own stave. So we have essentially a polyphonic vocal work being played by a keyboard instrument. With 6 distinct voices moving simultaneously, the Ricercar at the end of the Musical Offering might be considered the high point of the entire work. In order to perform the piece, it requires complete independence of body and mental capacity by the performer. The entirety of the Musical Offering serves as an exercise of musical virtuosity and analytical development by the performer. We see a lot of puzzle solving that needs to take place in order to play these pieces, and the Ricercar 6 is the pinnacle of this style.
Although Felix Mendelssohn is remembered today primarily as a composer and pianist, he was actually also a really tremendous organist. From what we can tell, he was almost entirely self-taught on the instrument, which he seems to have had a strong affinity for from a very young age. While he did not compose prolifically for the instrument, his organ works, such as the 6 organ sonatas, published as Opus 65, in many ways reveal his interest in the heritage of Bach, specifically his organ works, in their return to an emphasis on chorale melodies and fugal textures as foundations of the organ repertoire. Interestingly, Mendelssohn was commissioned to write the 6 organ sonatas by an English publishing company, who also at the same time commissioned from him an edition of J.S. Bach's organ chorale preludes. Mendelssohn had a number of these organ works in his possession in the form of autograph and copyist manuscripts. The projects for organ, commissioned by the English Publishing Company, were completed in 1845, and here at the RBI we have a copy of the 1845 chorale preludes by Bach, edited by Felix Mendelssohn. This document is evidence of the great care with which Mendelssohn treated the preparation of editions of Bach's works. Mendelssohn prepared a signed preface included at the front of the volume. This tells us a good deal about how Mendelssohn approached the primary sources in his possession and speaks to the many complicated factors that continue to influence the creation of Bach's editions. It also sounds to me like Mendelssohn was a fairly astute musicologist, and I think he would have really enjoyed seeing our collection here at the RBI. As evidenced by this edition of Bach's chorales, the chorale itself, the melodies of chorales, acts as a vital musical link between the music of Bach and many subsequent composers, from Mendelssohn to the more recent late composer David Maslanka. Chorales populate the works of Mendelssohn and in many ways unite his work to that of the German Lutheran tradition. So, when in 1830 he had the opportunity to write a composition for the tercentenary of the Augsburg Confession, he began to write his Symphony No. 5, which is today better known as the Reformation Symphony. And in the final movement of the symphony, Martin Luther's Ein Festgeburt rises up as the main musical material and culminates in the presentation of the full chorale at the very end of the work.